Welcome to Industry TV Network. Hit the like button, share, and subscribe. In this video, we're going to be talking about some of the times that Florence Ballard was having after leaving the Supremes. And also, we're going to be talking about the making of the movie Mahogany. Enjoy. In January 1975, sad news about Florence Ballard made headlines across the country. Ex-Supreme broke and living on welfare. Accompanying the news reports were photographs of a dejected-looking Florence posing in front of a picture of the original Supremes in shimmering red sequined gowns. Now Florence was 31 years old with 3 children supported on ADC, Aid to Dependent Children. For the last 8 years, ever since that night in Las Vegas, when Berry Gordy ordered her off the stage, Florence's life had been slowly slipping downhill. Her standard comment, published in Ebony magazine in February of 1969, as to why she left the Supremes was, "Oh, I was just tired of traveling so much and wanted to settle down. I don't know why people are still interested in all that past history. I get so tired of answering questions about whether Diana and I had hair-pulling fights. I've told people over and over again that we didn't have any fights. I'll be back. I'm like Richard Nixon. Remember how everybody thought he was washed up? Now look at where he is today." When asked about Berry Gordy, she would only say, "We are very cordial to each other. He's a very nice man." A troubled history always seemed to embrace Florence Ballard's solo career. One former Motown publicist, who went on to work for Florence, now insists that she was intimidated about continuing as a solo performer, especially after she went to play in Atlantic City and received threatening phone calls that she should not go on stage. One of the writers who worked on Florence's ABC Records material claims that he received a telephone call from someone who threatened that if he wrote any more songs for her, his fingers would be broken. Meanwhile, in her official ABC Records biography, Florence was not allowed to mention the fact that she was a former member of the Supremes because of her release agreement with Motown. How ironic, considering that it was Florence who chose the name in the first place from the list provided by Motown. For the past several years, Florence was a member of the world's most famous entertainment trio, was the only allusion to the Supremes in Ballard's press material. In 1970, Florence filed a lawsuit against Motown, Berry Gordy, Diana Ross, and the Supremes, charging that she had been maliciously ousted from the group and asked for $8.7 million. "You can't buck the boss no matter how wrong he may seem," she said privately at the time. And to get in the way of an aggressor bent on being a superstar is to get trampled for sure. Her suit was dismissed by the courts, saying that her release from the Supremes was legally binding unless she could return to Gordy the $160,000 she received as a settlement, which she could not do. The Chapmans' marriage had been unstable for years, and the couple finally separated in 1973 after a now paranoid and often inebriated Florence accused her husband of secretly working with unknown enemies she felt were bent on ruining her life. "And you probably still working for Berry Gordy too," she accused her husband. "But Flo, you've been plotting with Berry Gordy. I just know it," she said. For the most part, Diana and Mary had nothing to do with Flo after she was fired. When it became obvious that she was going to lose her home, Diana did try to save the house by paying off the mortgage. She and Tommy Chapman were unable to come to terms on how the transaction should take place. Though Mary knew that Diana tried to help save Florence's house, she decided not to mention this in her Dreamgirl memoirs. In her book, she also didn't address the question of why she never tried to help her friend financially. After Florence was forced to move her family out of the home, by this time she had a third daughter, Lisa Marie. Jet Magazine contacted Flo to do a story about her problems. She posed in front of the boarded-up home looking miserable and anxious and seeming to be overwhelmed by loneliness and maybe even fear. She was wearing a fur coat, one of her only treasures from the good old days. The photograph was so sad that Supremes fans around the world were shocked by it. Certainly, Motown and the Supremes had never represented this kind of pain and sorrow. I keep saying to myself, well, at least, couldn't I have kept my house for the sake of my children? Flo said. Couldn't that have been paid for somehow? And it tears me up inside. Flo, who now weighed about 190 pounds, moved into a $150 per month apartment on Detroit's west side with her mother and sister. Most of her days were spent watching television game shows and wishing she could compete for the big money prizes. If I had all your talent, girl, I sure wouldn't be sitting around all day watching game shows, Lurlee Ballard would scold her daughter. Why are you wasting your time? Just leave me alone, Florence would say sadly. But you should do commercials, her mother suggested. Sure, if I lost 40 pounds, Florence responded. On aid to dependent children, she received $135 every 2 weeks. I put off going on welfare for as long as I could, she had said. I had been suffering a lot of mental anguish and had to see a psychiatrist. During one period, I stayed in the house for over a year. I felt I couldn't take it anymore. I lost faith in everything. How could this have happened to me? How could I have it all and then have nothing? At this time, she was offered a job at an inner-city nursery school paying $80 a week, but she turned it down. No matter what happens now, she said, I'm determined to keep on. I don't want my kids remembering a mother on welfare. I want to give them something better. Some of Florence's fans would send her money in the mail. She would send them thank you cards. During a party at the home of one of her brothers, Flo drank more vodka than she could handle. As she walked home, a car pulled over to the curb. A man rolled down the window. Hey, B-I-T-C-H, ain't you that broke Supreme? Florence kept on walking. I said, hey, B-I-T-C-H, ain't you that broke Supreme? The voice shouted at her again. Florence, now with fire in her eyes, turned to face him. As she approached the car, her fists clenched, the door swung open, and before she knew it, she was being pulled in, kicking and screaming. She was pushed into the front seat. The car sped off. Soon she and her 2 kidnappers were parked in a vacant lot. Flo once said that she could barely remember what happened next. All I knew is that I was going to be killed, she recalled. I started praying for my life. I started praying for my girls. One can only imagine the terror she must have felt, especially considering what had happened to her when she was a teenager. Once the car was parked, the 2 men got out and began talking, apparently trying to figure out what to do with Florence now. It's time to make our move, she remembered hearing one of them say through the cracked window. But hey, man, she was one of the Supremes, said the other voice. Who the F cares? As they stood next to the automobile, talking and laughing, Florence reached over and locked the door on the driver's side. Hey, B-I-T-C-H, what you doing? Then Flo quickly locked the other door. She looked down at the ignition, and the keys were still in it. I remember thinking, thank you, Jesus, she said later. She started the car and drove away. As one of her assailants ran in front of the car to try to stop her, Florence stepped on the gas and tried to run him down. He jumped out of the way just in time to save his life. When she got home, Flo called the police. Then she went to bed and cried herself to sleep. Diana Ross, wearing an elegant full-length mauve one-shoulder gown and holding a matching marabou feather muff, was posed on the edge of a Baroque fountain atop the Giannicolo, one of Rome's most spectacular attractions. Action! Barry Gordy shouted through his bullhorn. On cue, Anthony Perkins put his hand on Diana's waist and gently pushed. She fell backwards into the freezing pool and proceeded to thrash about in the chilly water while screaming at Perkins at the top of her lungs. "Cut," Berry commanded. "One more time, Diane." "What?" she asked unbelievingly. "I said one more time," Berry repeated. "Enough is enough," she screamed. Diana climbed out of the pool. This was the 6th take. She had been dunked, dried off, changed, and dunked for the last time. Her once wavy wig now looked like a drowned rodent. Her makeup was streaming down her face, and her soaking wet gown clung to her body. One of her effeminate assistants approached the shivering actress with a fluffy white towel. "Oh my, Miss Ross. Just look at you now. You poor darling dear. Let me help you, please." "Just get away from me," Diana snapped. "God damn it." "You think we got a good take in there somewhere?" Berry asked one of his aides. He was totally oblivious to his star's fury. "Certainly hope so, Governor, because she isn't doing another." "Oh, she'll do another if I tell her to," Berry said confidently. From the beginning, when the Motown crew arrived in Spoleto, Italy, it was obvious that Diana Ross was miserable. By now, Berry had seen all of the footage he directed in Chicago and was thrilled with it. Every scene Diana shot involved dozens of takes, with Berry Gordy working as he liked to do in the recording studio, repeating an effort over and over and over, and then editing a portion of each attempt into the final product. By the end of the first week in Italy, Diana was totally disgusted with Berry and with the movie Mahogany. At the end of January 1975, Berry's mother Bertha suffered a cerebral hemorrhage while preparing to go to church. As soon as the family contacted Berry, he left Rome for Los Angeles. He was at his mother's side in the hospital when she died. Many of the Motowners attended the funeral, including Billy D. Williams. When Berry returned to Italy, he brought along his grieving father, who had had a leg amputated recently because of an illness. In Rome, before they got back to work, Berry was presented with a special American Music Award given to him by Diana Ross and transmitted via satellite during the award ceremony in America by Dick Clark Productions. A couple of days later, in the second week of February, work resumed. Matters between Diana and Berry were worse than ever. Everyone seemed on edge, especially with the knowledge that Diana Ross, Berry's former girlfriend, was a few months pregnant with her third child, but not showing yet. And Nancy Laviska, Berry's fiancée, was also some months pregnant with her first. The whole crew knew of the double pregnancies, but no one really wanted to discuss the irony of it all because of the obvious tension. "I'm not sure I like the idea of her being here in Rome with us," Diana told a friend. "But what can I do about it? Berry seems to love her." Diana stayed clear of Nancy, said that friend. Mostly, she liked her. Nancy was very giving and friendly to Diana. She was the most generous, understanding girlfriend Berry had ever had. But the fact that she was Berry's girl made Diana extremely nervous. "Who knows how much she knows about me?" was her main concern. What did Berry tell her? Nancy had a calming effect on Berry Gordy that Diana never had, and I think Diana must have known that. She had to be a bit jealous. I'm sure it added to the tension. Bob was in and out of Rome a lot, and when he was, he and Diana never spent time with Berry and Nancy, Bob being Diana Ross's husband at the time. It was costing $35,000 a day to film Mahogany, a pittance considering what it now costs to make a movie, but a sizable amount 15 years ago. Each extra day Berry spent making Diana refilm scenes put the production further into the red. To emphasize the cost overrun, Rob Cohen made his point dramatically. He withdrew $35,000 in cash from the Motown Productions bank account and began to throw the money into a trash can in front of Berry every time he would go above 8 takes. With each take, a few thousand more dollars went into the garbage. It was his way of illustrating to a man only concerned with the bottom line how much his behavior was actually costing him. Berry's a crapshooter, and he didn't understand the significance of $35,000 on paper. But cash, that's another story, Cohen said with a smile. Seeing cash go into the trash, that Berry understood. Bob Silverstein stayed with Diana for most of the filming in Europe and was well liked by the crew. He was a very attractive and nice fellow, associate producer Neil Hartley said. I liked him enormously, but she had to be the boss, and I got the feeling that she was driving him away. She was very charming, very classy, but a bit on the bossy side. Near the end of the schedule, Diana was working with a queasy stomach because of her pregnancy and a hot temper because of dealing with Berry. One particular day, the script called for her to run up and down a long flight of outdoor stairs, all the while shooing away pigeons. After about 24 takes, she was tired and irritable. God damn, Berry, isn't that enough? No, Diane. You gotta do nothing. I'm finished, she blustered as the startled crew looked on. Like hell you are, Berry said angrily, getting down from his director's chair. Now listen, you get back up on those stairs and... Diana looked like she had finally reached her boiling point. Before Berry could finish his sentence, she took a swing at him with the palm of her hand and made stinging contact with the side of his face. There was a loud smacking sound, and Berry's sunglasses flew a yard into the air. Hey, what the hell are you doing, woman? What's going on? I hate you, Diana screamed. That's what the hell is going on. Then she spun around and ran away. 4 assistants trailed behind her nervously asking, Miss Ross, what can we do to help? She threw her pearl and gold button earrings at them. You can just leave me alone, that's what you can do, goddammit, Diana shouted at them as she stepped into her trailer and slammed the door behind her. And you pack my makeup, she screamed at someone inside the trailer. I'm getting out of here. The rest of the crew and other actors squirmed in embarrassment. Does this mean we're done? Someone asked. I think so, was the answer. I got this call in my office that Diana had hit Berry and stormed off the location, recalled Rob Cohen, who was away planning the next day's shoot. By this time, I was fairly seasoned to the ups and downs of that relationship, so I can't say I was surprised that she hauled off and slapped the guy. She was always half seductive but angry, and he was always tolerant but mad. Their relationship was so complicated, everything a man and woman can possibly be to one another. Father, daughter, mother, son, lovers. Damned if I could figure it all out. I don't think Diana ever went back to the villa in which she was staying. She went right to the airport. I remember having to ship all of her clothes back later. When I saw Berry that day, he had a cut on his nose, but was fairly philosophical about the whole thing. He kept saying, Gosh, Rob, hell if I understand her anymore. She never used to do shit like that. Later, Gordy's press people released this statement to the media. I thought we might be too close for an effective director-star relationship. As director, I was naturally compelled to put on pressure to draw from her every emotion the script calls for. And this can be hard going between friends. She's nonetheless responded with resounding success. After Diana left, Berry's secretary, Edna Anderson, filled in for her by doing insert shots. A woman's hand holding a candle that drips wax during a party scene. A woman's figure in a red Iso Revolta sports car speeding down a bridge headed for disaster, and so forth. A montage sequence with Diana would be filmed in Los Angeles later after her temper had cooled. By this time, Berry had plenty of completed film ready to edit. In September 1975, theme to Mahogany, Do You Know Where You're Going To, was released. Prior to its release, Gordy and Michael Masser, who also composed the soundtrack to the film, argued over the music mix. Gordy wanted one version released and Masser another. As a last resort, Masser snuck into the recording studio and erased the version Gordy liked. At first, Berry was furious, but then he began to laugh. "That little blonde shithead," he said with a grin. "Okay, release his version." Michael Masser's version went to number 1 on the charts and is one of Diana Ross's most popular songs. Her performance was dreamy and compelling and set the stage beautifully for the release of the movie, which almost never happened. The advanced trade reviews for Mahogany were dreadful, and when Time magazine accused Berry of squandering one of America's most natural resources, Diana Ross, all hell broke loose. "See what I told you? Berry's ruining me," one friend of Diana's remembered her saying. "I'm one of America's most natural resources, and he's squandering me," she cried. I had to say that like that, y'all. "I got a call from Berry, and he said he was going to pull the picture," Rob Cohen remembered. "I said, Berry, please listen to me. This is not a picture for the critics or for Hollywood. This picture touches a human nerve, and it's going to work. You listen to me." "No, Rob, Diana's screaming, and I made a mistake." And Berry fumbled. His vulnerability was showing. "Did you see what Time magazine said about me? Geez, I really worked hard on this goddamn thing. What the hell am I going to do now, Rob?" "You released that film," Rob recalled having insisted. He realized that if Berry Gordy pulled the movie from release now, it would probably never come out. "Think about all the great things in that movie," Rob urged. "Think about all your hard work, all those long, endless nights editing, how the people in the crew loved you. Forget Diana, man. Think about you for a change. You did an effing incredible job, Berry. You deserve this." Berry did not answer immediately. "Okay," Berry said. "Good advice. You always have the best advice, you know that?" The two men laughed. "We'll see what happens," Berry added. "Forget Diana." In its first 2 weeks, Mahogany grossed nearly $7 million, and the demand for it was so strong that the Lowe's State in New York was forced to stay open around the clock in order to accommodate the crowds. It broke the opening day record at the Manhattan Movie House, which The Godfather had previously held for 3 years. Suddenly, it became stylish to sit in a movie theater at 3 a.m. and watch Diana Ross in all of her splendor. People in ticket lines were controlled by mounted police. Despite the film's less than critical acclaim, the worst reviews in the history of the world, Berry said later, some of Diana's notices were very good. Wrote Charles Champlin in the Los Angeles Times, "She is out of the Louis B. Mayer 30s. A genuine movie queen who wears her heart and soul close to the surface. She is the absolute essence of the star as a symbol of inviolable escape from the humdrum ordinary bowl." Other critics weren't so generous. Rex Reed, who praised Diana Ross for her work in Lady Sings the Blues, observed, "Mahogany exists as a hymn to the celebration of how glorious it is to be Diana Ross." He also criticized Diana's designs, writing that they looked like Halloween costumes at a Harlem relief ball. Oh, that was cruel. Michael Reiskind, by now Berry's right-hand man, was so outraged by the reviews that he shot off a letter to the Hollywood Reporter and suggested a new method of critiquing movies. He proposed that each new film should be viewed at special public previews across the country. Ratings would then be released to the press and television as official authorized reviews. He wrote, "This would be much more accurate as to the public's taste than that of a single professional whose tastes are probably jaded and prejudiced," he wrote. According to Rashkind's logic, which certainly underscores the Motown system of total control, these screenings would be beneficial because they would be held by the producer or releasing company and controlled by them for their benefit. Needless to say, the Motion Picture Association of America, MPAA, never considered adopting Motown's proposal, but it did raise a few eyebrows. Berry Gordy brought Mahogany in at almost double its $2 million budget allotted by Paramount, which means that the additional money came out of his pocket. But in the end, it was a profitable film. Mahogany was not a blockbuster. It had a large black audience, but never the white acceptance Gordy thought it would enjoy. Still, though, it isn't a brilliant movie, but it is a touching one. People do remember it. I'll admit that if I had been the producer or director, I might have made some different choices, Diana said about the movie. All in all, I have no regrets. The whole experience was good for me. Soon, "Do you know where you're going to?" became a catchphrase with Diana Ross's employees. Shelley Berger, one of her managers under Gordy, would say that the question was asked about 15 times a day as sort of a practical joke until at last Diana had had enough. "Do you know where you're going to?" Berger asked Diana good-naturedly during an interview. "No, goddammit, no," she snapped at him. "And I don't care either." I will continue this series with another video soon, but I hope you enjoyed this one. Mahogany is one of my favorite movies of all time, and at times when I feel a little nostalgic, I go right back to it and watch it. As a matter of fact, you can watch it for free on YouTube. Peace and love, everyone.